Hey there. So, do you struggle with anxiety? Maybe with flying? Maybe your heart races, your hands sweat, and the thought of boarding a plane feels absolutely unbearable. Well, today I'm going to be sharing a case study with you from a practice where a client of mine overcame flight anxiety in just 7 sessions. And I'm going to show you how structured, data driven therapy makes this possible. So, first, I have this client that came in and they have this very specific problem with flight anxiety. Each one of my clients that come in to me always receive a battery of different assessments. From those assessments and the need that they've said they've had when they come to me, we focus then on specific assessments. So, this individual, we focused on the GAD, which is generalized anxiety, PHQ-9 for depression, the DASS is depression, anxiety, and stress, and then a phobia-specific severity scale. So what's really interesting about this client is that they actually didn't have extremely high clinical levels, but it was really about their lived experience. This individual stated that they had intense physiological responses when they flew, and it was interfering with their life. And in fact, one of the things they said was that they were then using avoidance strategies like sleeping through the entire flight just to stop feeling the anxiety, but they recognized it got worse. So each client, again, receives this battery of assessments, and then I develop a treatment plan. With this treatment plan, I also give them an estimated timeline of how many sessions I think it's going to take. This is because I don't want you to think that you're endlessly sitting on my couch talking to me. It's very important that we hold ourselves to a timeline. I never want you to feel like my piggy bank. Believe me, I've had clients say that to me. I never want you to feel that way with me. So I developed a treatment plan for this individual, and I thought, I can help you get the tools and feel better within 9 sessions. And ultimately, it only took us 7. So let me kind of describe the process with this individual. So the first 3 sessions are really about building rapport, getting to know each other, and preparing for EMDR. So during this time, again, we're going over assessments, getting to know each other. I've introduced my Untangling Anxiety workbook and the preparation for EMDR. So if you're not familiar with EMDR, it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's just a fancy way of saying we're exposing the brain to the feared stimulus and we're desensitizing the brain to the fear. So what it really uses, they call it eye movement, but we can use all kinds of different mediums as that we do bilateral stimulation. Bilateral just means each hemisphere of the brain. So in EMDR, what we do is the way we have to prepare is a couple of different ways. One, the individual needs to identify that feared memory. We need to identify the feared cognition or the negative cognition. So this is that negative belief of self. So it might be something like, I'm not safe. And then we have to come up with a positive cognition, and we use that to kind of replace it. And that could be something like, I can handle this. It's not sunshine and unicorns like, I'm never going to be afraid of flying again. Because listen, there's a healthy amount of fear and anxiety for all of us. We can't eradicate it completely. So we come up with the negative cognition and the positive cognition. Now, what I will say is this is the hardest part of EMDR. The thing that people see like on movies, the eye movement, I use something called a theratapper. So it buzzes their hands one after another. The hardest part is the negative cognition. If we can't find the truly negative belief that's associated with this feared memory or this feared response, it really doesn't help you desensitize. So it really is the hardest part of preparing for EMDR is to find the right negative cognition. And sometimes this is just trial and error. With this client, it did take a couple different times for us to find the right negative cognition. How we know it's the right negative cognition is once we go into the EMDR sessions, we see the SUDS increase. So let me tell you what a SUDS is. While we're doing EMDR and throughout counseling experience, all my clients are exposed to and educated on SUDS. That stands for Subjective Unit of Distress. So essentially, this is a scale from 0 to 100. 0 is I'm not feeling a lot of distress. 100 is this is through the roof, really severe distress. So we track SUD scores throughout the EMDR sessions and throughout their time with me, and I track all of it. So a SUDS, again, is from 0 to 100. So it took us all this time through sessions 1 through 3, get to know each other and prepare. Also, while he's taking part in a lot of the homework assignments that are in the Untangling Anxiety Workbook. So by session 4, that's when we began EMDR. Okay, so EMDR is an exposure therapy. That's all it is. I use EMDR and I also use prolonged exposure. Both are highly, highly effective. And again, desensitizing the brain to something that you feared. This is not a cure. This is not a magic wand. What it actually does is that oftentimes when we have a feared memory, that it is filed inappropriately or incorrectly in our brain. So for example, somebody is shot at, okay? And then for the rest of the time, like a car backfires and they have the same physiological trauma response, or they hear, a garage door close, whatever it may be, something that really spikes that same memory, but it's inaccurate. What we do with EMDR is we desensitize to that memory. We also desensitize sometimes to physiological reactions. And I did this with that client as well. So in addition to this session 4, what I did, and they weren't too happy about it, is that I actually wanted to mimic even more of the sensations that they had while they were flying. One of the things that they felt was a really high racing heart, and they felt really hot. So what did I have them do? I have them drink coffee before session, and I turned up the heat in my office. So again, why did I do this? Because anxiety isn't just about thoughts. Oftentimes, it's how we think about it, but our body absolutely reacts. So by recreating that space and those sensations in a very safe space, they were able to learn that this isn't dangerous. That helps the brain even more through that. So by sessions 5 and 6, you can see here in the chart that his SUDS ratings dropped dramatically. So during an EMDR session, I will do something called an iteration. It's different for everyone. Sometimes it's 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or 60 seconds, sometimes 2 minutes. After each iteration of the bilateral stimulation, I'll say, where are you at? And that's just simply where they give me their SUD score, and they'll say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So you can see that this individual reported their highest distress score got to about 60. But what you can see with the subsequent EMDR sessions is that they literally couldn't generate distress any longer during our exposure session. So after that, what we did is we developed a fear hierarchy. So you can kind of think of this as a fear ladder. So what we came up with was in vivo, so in person, in real life, and imaginal exposure strategies that they could continue to practice before they prepared for their next real live flight. So what we do is we continue to expose the brain to the thing we're afraid of. So when we do the in vivo, it might be reading an article or watching a movie. Why do we do this? Again, so one of the examples I give is imagine, or you probably don't have to imagine, when you were a kid, you were riding your bike, and this is in the Untangling series, you're riding your bike and you fell. And what did you do? You probably scraped up your hands and your knees, and you just thought, I'm never getting on that bike again. So the trauma of the fall then placed the fear of the object, the bike. So what we had to do when we were kids is, we had to look at that bike and kind of think about riding the bike. Then maybe your mom or dad encouraged you to just go over to the bike and maybe straddle it. Then maybe mom or dad is like, okay, well, why don't you put your feet on the pedals and you don't have to bike anywhere, and I'm right here. And then maybe it's like, you're going to pedal, but mom, hold on to my bike seat. But before you know it, you're not afraid of the bike anymore, and you're ripping out of the driveway and having fun, and you're not even thinking about being afraid of the bike anymore. That's what exposure therapy is. That's what EMDR is. That's what we're doing. We're getting you back on the bike. So here's the exciting part. My client came back to session and they had their first live flight. and they reported they had little to no anxiety. And in fact, they said to me, a couple times, the flight there and the flight coming home, I felt the physiological sensations that we talked about, because we identify those things too. Your body whispers far before your brain figures it out. And they said, okay, I recognized, oh my gosh, I'm starting to breathe more shallow, or I feel my shoulders are getting tense. I'm going to now use the tools to calm myself, because that's part of 1 through 3, is that we have to find soothing tools. So is that box breathing? Is that sour food? Whatever we come up with, we give you a toolbox of items that you use to calm yourself down. And what this person said to me is like, within 60 seconds, I was totally fine. So what began as a 9-session planned treatment plan, we completed everything in 7. Now, this is what I want to say. This was a different case. Typically 7, that's great. If you didn't have really high clinical distress levels, fantastic. This isn't always for everyone. What I'll say is I have done EMDR and other prolonged exposure with other individuals that have complex trauma and very, very high distress scores on their assessments. What I will say is that it increases their ability to overcome these feared moments, these feared memories a lot quicker. And the wonderful, beautiful thing about, if we can find that core memory or that core negative belief, there's something the brain does called generalization. And oftentimes what it does is it generalizes to other feared memories, and they're no longer as poignant, and they're able to again step into those tools. EMDR and exposure therapy is not a cure. It's not a cure. We should have distressing memories to the things that have happened to us. We should have a healthy dose of anxiety of flying in a metal tube in the air. That's normal. We just want to make sure that we turn down those reactions so that we can live an abundant life. So we got done in 7 sessions. That truly is the power of combining data-driven assessments and a structured approach, including EMDR and my workbook. Now, again, this case resolved very, very quickly, but it is about the process that matters. It's the comprehensive assessments, it's the clear goals, and it is the measurable outcomes. Clients see real progress and they leave with the tools they need to maintain it. It's amazing. So if you struggle with anxiety, whether it's about flying or anything else, or trauma, know that therapy doesn't have to be just endless talking. With the right structure and strategies, change is absolutely possible and it's measurable. So if you want to learn more about how we can work together, make sure you visit my website at untangledmind.net.